time to start our webcast. This week's webcast is using New Mexico archives. We have Dr. Kevin Comerford here. Dr. Comerford is, Dr. Comerford is the Director of Information Technology Services, Digital Initiatives, Communications at the University of New Mexico Libraries. He's implemented a variety of web resources for UNM using open source applications. The Hillerman portal, the journals portal, the searchable ornithological research archives, and celebrating New Mexico statehood. And we're looking forward to hearing about how History Day students can use primary sources within the state and find them through the digital archive, primarily hosted at the UNM libraries. The next webinar will be on October 25th. Ask a website expert. So any students who are working on websites, we especially encourage you to join in. If you have any questions, you're welcome to use the chat function on the YouTube page to ask your questions. Or you can email them to me at historyday@nmhum.org. And we'll get to as many questions as we can during our time today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Comerford. And thanks for joining us.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you, and I'm excited to talk to you about archival resources for research in New Mexico. You know, in this state, we are extremely lucky that we not only have a rich heritage and multiple cultures and a lot of wonderful museum, library, and archive collections that reflect those cultures and history, but we have some nice tools, online tools that you can use and your students can use to expedite finding those materials for research. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my desktop here, and I have some slides to show you all first. We'll go through a number of the different tools that are available. And once we're done with the slides, I was going to take time to actually do a demo of a couple of the tools for you. So here I'm going to go ahead and share out my desktop. And let's see. Now, 1 second here. Okay. So, as I mentioned, in New Mexico, we have a variety of online tools that you can use for research purposes. And let's move to the first one, which you may have heard about before. It's called the Rocky Mountain Online Archive. And really, this is the best single online resource for finding archive information for the whole state in one place. It is called the Rocky Mountain Online Archive because we have institutions in Wyoming and Colorado who also use that. but essentially, it's a central catalog of archival collections. There's over 8,000 collections that are available on the inventories of those collections are available online. Now, that doesn't mean that each of those 8,000 collections has been digitized or is available to be downloaded or displayed on a web browser. But it does mean that you can see by each institution what collections they have in their archives and get a detailed inventory of them. Now, in some cases, the directory of these archival collections will point you to where there are online resources from that collection. So there might be digitized photographs or digitized papers. But at the very minimum, you'll see what collection materials are held at a particular institution. And also, it's important to note that while this is the best centralized tool for finding archival information in the state, not all institutions have included all of their collections on the Rocky Mountain Online Archive. So there may be gaps, and there might be cases where you still need to go search the library index for a particular library or archive to make sure that you find everything that they have. It's the Rocky Mountain Online Archive is voluntary, and sometimes institutions are just slow in getting their inventories put online, and sometimes they make a conscious decision not to include everything on the website. I'll show you in the demo here in just a few minutes, but for each inventory, and each inventory in archives terms is called a finding aid, you get about 10 different sections of information. You get everything from a collection summary and a biography of the person who owned or created the archives originally. And then you get a detailed index of the contents of that archival collection. So it will tell you if there's photographs, or if there's correspondence, or if there are manuscript papers, or other kinds of material. Sometimes collections have things like architectural plans, drawings, sketchbooks, illustrations, all kinds of material, both pictorial and textual, can be found using the Rocky Mountain Online Archive. This is just a list of all of the partner institutions who have put at least some of their archival indexes on the Rocky Mountain Online Archive. And it's a nice ready reference. You'll see that pretty much all of the major institutions in New Mexico participate in this service. And I'm slowly but surely recruiting a lot of the smaller institutions from towns like Los Lunas and Roswell, Silver City, etc., to add their museum and archive collections on here as well. So the Rocky Mountain Online Archive is always growing. We probably add 4 or 5 new institutions every year. And that's been a pretty steady growth rate. In addition, if you are interested in visiting other towns that have exemplary archival collections, you can use the Rocky Mountain Online Archive to examine those collections and at least find out a little bit about what they have before you go and visit. So, for example, Fort Lewis College has a fantastic Center for Southwest Studies that has an amazing collection. And you can look at the inventories for the archival collections that they have here online. Now, the next web resource we want to talk about is for pictorial information. So digital images of photographs and artwork and documents are all contained in the site New Mexico Digital Collections. This is also another collaborative project that includes 27 different institutions from around the state, and it focuses just on New Mexico history and culture. There's over 108 individual collections of material in the website, and there's over 146,000 digital images. And all of the digital images can be downloaded directly from the New Mexico Digital Collections website. They are not high resolution enough to where you could print them in and reproduce them, say, in a book or illustration for a poster, but they are high resolution enough that, for example, your students would be able to use them in a project that they're doing that might involve using a standard printer, color printer, or putting images up on a personal website. Again, just like the Rocky Mountain Online Archive, not everything from each institution who participates is online. So most of the institutions have only put a portion of their total collections online. And usually that has to do more with the fact that it costs money and staff time to add materials online, to digitize original photographs and documents, etc., than it does anybody being unwilling to put all of their collection material online. If for a particular project you wanted to formally publish an image from one of the institutions on New Mexico Digital Collections, they do require permissions. And that's, again, just for formal publication. If you're going to use the images for educational or research purposes, then certainly they're free and you don't need to obtain permission. But permission information is available for each institution at the bottom of each image record, and I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. This is a third tool that kind of integrates both the Rocky Mountain Online Archive and New Mexico Digital Collections and about 10 different other little web resources around the state. I built this for the state centennial, and it's called Celebrating New Mexico Statehood. And this is a great resource for students in that you can search across the University of New Mexico library catalog, New Mexico's digital collections, Rocky Mountain Online Archive, and a variety of other little websites that are maintained by the state library and a lot of the Department of Cultural Affairs institutions. So the student can put in one search term up in the top right corner of the front page, as you can see in the screenshot, and they'll receive back a complete search result for images and archive records, books, papers, reports, etc. So this is a nice way to get students started at looking at different kinds of New Mexico materials. We haven't updated them since the centennial celebration, but Celebrating New Mexico Statehood also has a number of lesson plans for K through 12 level lessons in learning to use library and archive materials. And a lot of them are specific subject based. So there's a lesson plan on how to look up music resources online for New Mexico historical music recordings and so forth. Again, a nice resource for students to get started learning about all of the different collection content in their state's libraries and museums. I just wanted to mention a couple of the major institutions that hold very large collections of archival material in the state. The first one, of course, we'll talk about is here at University of New Mexico. It's called the Center for Southwest Research and Special Collections. It has an extensive collection of Southwest and New Mexico oriented manuscripts from authors. For example, we have all of the manuscripts from Rudolfo Anaya's work, also Tony Hillerman's work. We have all of his manuscripts and papers as well. And we actually have put the Tony Hillerman manuscripts online, and I'll show you those again in just a second here. We also have an extensive historical photograph and pictorial collections. And a lot of these have not been digitized yet. We're still working on them. While there's thousands of images from the Center for Southwest Research that are online, there's still quite a large number that haven't made it online yet, and it will probably be a number of years before we can actually digitize everything. We also have an extensive special collection of books. And these are unfortunately not books that you can check out because they are historical in nature somehow. But if you are looking for an example of a D.H. Lawrence signed first edition of one of his works, we'll have it here in the Center for Southwest Research. The same thing with John Nichols' work. We have a first edition of Milagro Beanfield War and his several other novels that are autographed by the author. And there are many other resources in the collections that include antique books, which have to be managed with great care, and so usually we have to take special precautions before we remove them from the collection so users can see them. But there's a whole range of material. We even have some Spanish colonial treaties. They aren't obviously any of the major treaties or the most famous treaties, but there are some minor treaties in our antique documents collection. And we also have a lot of land grant archive material here as well, and a lot of genealogical material, which again is very specialized to New Mexico. So unfortunately, a lot of that material has not yet been put online. However, I will give you the contact information for Center for Southwest Research in just a second, and they will be able to help you do at least a limited amount of things like land grant, water rights, genealogical, and other New Mexico based historical research. We also have an archive of images of Spanish colonial documents that are actually about New Mexico, but they are held in the national archives, the several national archives in Spain. So we don't have the original documents, but we do in the Spanish Colonial Research Center have photographs of those documents, And they're all royal administrative documents like cedulas and other kinds of royal decrees and land grants and so forth that deal with the Spanish administration of the New Mexico province, but are not actually here in New Mexico. We also have an extensive vertical file collection of newspaper clippings and other kinds of ephemera, and these we have just put the index to the complete clippings file online on the Center for Southwest Research website. These can be great ways to look up news, newspaper releases, playbills for theater plays and musicals, etc. Can be a great way to find that kind of material and it's all indexed by subject. And I see a question here, can librarians help students with Spanish language documents? Yes, our senior historical archivist at the Center for Southwest Research, her name is Nancy Brown Martinez, and she is a specialist in New Mexico Spanish documents and can help in all of those areas that I mentioned. So genealogy, land grant, antique documents, etc. She's the person to contact. Also, in addition to the Center for Southwest Research, there are some specialty archives, and they are typically not what you'd send your students to as a first line of research, but it's worth mentioning that they are very special collections here at UNM. The first is the Maxwell Anthropology Museum Photo Archives. A lot of their material, they do have some of their material up online, and I'm actually working with their photo archivist so we can put more online. We're just sort of at the beginning, but they have a phenomenal photo archive that deals with cultural anthropology. Also, the UNM Art Museum has, it actually has a fairly illustrious past, and there are extensive exhibition files from past museum exhibitions that are available for specialized research. Once again, these aren't resources you'd want to send a student to first thing, but if they really started, and like for example, they started working with Rocky Mountain Online Archive and then sort of moved to talking with one of the librarians or archivists at the Center for Southwest Research, if they're really interested in the in-depth kind of research that those collections would yield, then we would definitely help them go over to those institutions and take a look at what they have available online. Here's the contact information for the Center for Southwest Research. If you just email CSWRREF, all one word there, at unm.edu, you can get a hold of any of the librarians or historical archivists. You will definitely be able to get a hold of Nancy Brown Martinez, who I mentioned can help with Spanish language documents. And then there is also a phone line that's answered during normal business hours. I put in here about reproduction and publishing fees, although that's not something I know we have to worry much about. However, you as teachers, if you are interested in doing research and publishing, the charges are fairly moderate for obtaining permission to publish in a book or in a journal article an illustration from the collections. Also, if you have a student, or if you yourself can't come to the Center for Southwest Research to look at original primary source material, there is a small list of independent researchers that can be contracted. They obviously want to get paid, but that they will do some of the research for you, at least examining, in detail specific collections that you might be interested in. Also, something that is quite useful for students. The New Mexico Historical Society has put all of their newsletters online, the newsletter La Cronica, and those can be found on the University of New Mexico Open Journals portal. And you can see it's about number 3 down on the screenshot here is La Cronica. That's a wonderful source for regional and local history items that are quite well digested for a newsletter or short newspaper article format. Coming soon, another resource that students I know will love a lot will be, we'll have the New Mexico Architecture Journal. Now that has gone out of print, but it's an outstanding resource for learning about the history and all of the important buildings that are in New Mexico, sort of the historical aspect of our wonderful architecture in the state. And it's probably, this is probably not the right level for your students right now, but we will be putting the Colonial Latin American Historical Review online as well. We also have a web archive, which is kind of interested, and I have a number of UNM students who have been interested in looking at this. But we have gone and archived a number of political officials' websites, most notably Senator Jeff Bingaman's, his entire website from when he was in office as our senator is available online, and you can browse it as if it was still up and live on the web using this URL here. We also have a number of like the of UNM web publications, most notably UNM Today, the sort of online news magazine. And we have some of the state representatives and senators. They have had small websites by comparison, but for example, we have State Senator Dee Dee Feldman's official website archived. Another resource, great for students to work with, historical newspapers. We have just completed an NEH grant to digitize as many New Mexico newspapers as possible and try to digitize the entire run of those papers. Here you can see Chronicling America is the URL where you can go to the Library of Congress and actually look for newspaper articles that have been digitized and are online. Now, we don't have, for example, the Albuquerque Journal because they didn't want to participate, but we have a number of both Spanish language and English newspapers from smaller communities around the state. And this is an excellent way of representing history to students, of course. Like I mentioned, Tony Hillerman's papers are all online here at this URL, ehillerman.unm.edu. And you can look at them in their entirety. They're quite amazing. I also wanted to mention that New Mexico State University has its own wonderful resources, and some of those they have put on Rocky Mountain Online Archive and New Mexico Digital Collections. However, they have a lot more material that they have put online themselves that has not yet made it over to those. So I've got here a list of some of their most interesting. They have a historic photograph collection, their university archives. Really, the Rio Grande historical collections are fabulous. And their URL here for their digital collections is at the bottom of this slide here. I see another question. Will librarians handle reproduction of specific materials? Yes. Now, there is a limit, of course, of what we can do. And you'd have to negotiate this with, for example, the Center for Southwest Research. If a collection has not yet been digitized, if there are specific pieces of the collection that you would like to have a digital copy of, or even a Xerox copy of, the Center for Southwest Research staff are certainly very helpful and willing to do that. A lot of the collections span thousands of pages of documents, so you would need to be pretty specific about what you want to have digitized. And they will, for a fee, digitize a larger section of a collection. But it's something that you'd have to get a quote for in terms of what it would cost. But certainly if for example, if there's a collection of correspondence and the Rocky Mountain Online Archive inventory says there's a photograph in this folder, and you emailed the CSWR staff and said, would you mind scanning that one photograph for me? They'd be more than happy to do that. Here's the URL specifically for the Rio Grande Historical Collections at New Mexico State University. And here's the URL for their university archives, which they have phenomenal yearbooks and other historical materials associated with the institution there that are online and can be both viewed and downloaded as well. Of course, there are many others resources that we don't have time to cover tonight. But of course, any of the Department of Cultural Affairs institutions, all of them, as I mentioned, participate in some way or other with Rocky Mountain Online Archive or New Mexico Digital Collections. But again, none of them have published their entire collections online. So whatever you see on RMOA or New Mexico Digital Collections is really just the tip of the iceberg. So further research at any of those institutions would require visiting their site. I'm also working with the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Library Special Collections Branch. And over the next couple of months, they are in the middle right now of digitizing a historic postcard collection, and also a number of a series of yearbook type publications that the library used to do historically back into the 40s or 50s or so. In addition to that, the New Mexico State Library, and their URL is here, they have put all of the back issues of El Palacio, which is a wonderful historic New Mexico magazine publication that deals with New Mexico history, culture, and Southwest issues in a larger extent. Those are all online at the state library site. Students go nuts for those. and they have wonderful illustrations and lively articles and so forth. And then each community, you know, I find in the state has a wonderful hidden treasure, and I try to get around as much as possible to both provide help and encourage our smaller museums and libraries and historical societies to digitize their content. But for example, the Los Lunas Museum, I think they have some of their photos online. Also I can't remember the specific name of it, but in Roswell, there's I believe a planetarium and art center that has a wonderful collection that they have put a little bit online too. For the future, just really quick, soon coming to the New Mexico Digital Collection site, we just started working with the National Hispanic Cultural Center, who will be putting a collection up. We'll continue to try to get smaller organizations around the state to digitize and publish their content. And then both of these major services are going to be redesigned in the next couple of years. So I know it doesn't do you any good right now with your students and National History Day, but keep your eyes out for new changes and new features in both of those. And then there's also, it might be worth looking into the collections in the Digital Public Library of America, which you can Google and get their URL. They have a lot of regional material. They don't have much of anything at all yet for New Mexico, but they do have some more Southwest general historical material. We'll be participating with them to put basically New Mexico digital collections and RMOA up on the Digital Public Library of America in a couple years. And then Hothy Trust is an initiative that digitizes historic manuscripts, documents, and monographs, and we'll be participating with them shortly as well. Now, I know it looks like we're running out of time here or overtime. If you still have a few minutes, would be happy to do a little demo of Rocky Mountain Online Archive and New Mexico's digital collections. So I'm going to shut down my PowerPoint here, and you get a view of my desktop, and I'll bring up Rocky Mountain Online Archive. And let's see if I can. There we go. So Rocky Mountain Online Archive has a simple search mode that's very easy to use. So for example, if I just type on the front page here in the search box, Tony Hillerman, it doesn't work as good as Google does, but it's not bad. And I get a search result here from Tony Hillerman, and you notice that we have the inventory of the Tony Hillerman papers, and then we also have a Tony Hillerman photograph collection listed here. Let's look at the photograph collection inventory real quick. And you can see, one second here, over in the left sidebar, there are a number of different sections that introduce you to the collection. So we usually have a collection summary, which is basic information about the collection, and it includes the ID number of the collection, and a short abstract that tells you in general what you'll find in that collection. It'll tell you how large the collection is. And then if the collection refers to a person or group of people, there's often a biographical sketch that's usually just a couple of paragraphs. Some of the collections that we have, there are restrictions on them. The donors, for example, have made it clear they don't want those reproduced. So you'll find those restrictions here. And then if we scroll down, the contents list tells you how much is in the collection. In this case, we really just have one box and one large folder with a variety of small photographs in it. And I see we got another couple questions here. Let me stop for those. Is RMOA mostly of regional interest? Would students find resources on U.S. history projects there? No, it is. Well, let me qualify that. The focus of most of the institutions who participate in RMOA are West-Southwest studies and history and culture. Now, there are a number of institutions that have parts of their collections that would relate to U.S. history or other areas of popular historical research. So, for example, I know in the Center for Southwest Research, we do have a number of collections that are related to World War II. There's a photographer that we have his collection of World War II era photographs, and there are some documents and so forth that relate to World War II. In terms of U.S. history, we do have political papers. These would be something that, again, a student would just want to dip their toe into. But for example, we have the collected political papers of Harrison Schmitt, who used to be our senator, and he was the last man to walk on the moon. He also worked great, he also worked with NASA to develop their science program for the Apollo missions. So there is some interesting material that we have in the Harrison Schmitt collection that you can look up on Rocky Mountain Online Archive that would relate to U.S. history. But we don't have specific historical guides that would help them. If you do go, however, to the UNM main library page, we have a feature called Research Guides that are sort of general guides to particular topics, and I believe we do have some U.S. history content there. Another question, are higher res files available from New Mexico Digital Collections? Yes, most of the institutions do have higher resolution files, but they are not published online. You would have to contact the institution and ask for it, and then you would have to tell them what purpose you want it for. Now, we typically, for research and school projects, will mostly offer high-res files for specific student projects or something like that without charge. Of course, if somebody's going to publish, then there would be a fee involved. And then, again, as I mentioned, there are restrictions on some collections, so we would not be able to offer high-resolution files on everything. So you'd need to contact the Center for Southwest Research or one of the other institutions you're interested in order to find those, find out if they will provide those high-resolution images for you. Going back to Rocky Mountain Online Archive, let's take a look real quick at the inventory of the Tony Hillerman papers, which is a pretty extensive collection. And there's a decent biography there. And you can see here that the collection of his papers is very large. There's 18 processed boxes and 10 boxes that have not been inventoried yet because the Hillerman family just gave us the material, so we haven't had a chance to sort through it yet. But here you can see in box 1 of the collection that we have folders in the right column, and each folder corresponds to a particular document. So we have, it looks like 6 different versions of his manuscript for the novel The Blessing Way. And then his second novel was The Fly on the Wall. We have another 6 versions of that. And then we have another folder that's dedicated to correspondence regarding The Blessing Way. So there's a whole variety of materials here that you can access if you go to the Center for Southwest Research and actually ask to see those materials. Now, the Hillerman collection is a special case because this is one of the few that we've gotten to actually digitize. So I'm going to go to the Tony Hillerman portal. And the URL is in the presentation, and you can access that. But if you look here on the front page, I'm going to click on the manuscripts button, and then I'll pick The Blessing Way. And you see that we've got digital copies of each of these manuscripts. So for example, here's the final edited manuscript, and if I click on the view button, it loads a manuscript viewer that I can actually flip through and look at the original manuscript. And we can even jump to specific chapters in the manuscript. And not only can you see how the author has been developing the story through the this version of the manuscript, but you can also see all of the editor's marks in the manuscript where his book company editors have been correcting his work. I think I got another question here. Should students use the preferred citation information on the pages in their bibliographies? The processing archivists for any of the collections that you see have gone to the trouble of creating a preferred institutional citation. So yes, it's definitely useful to use that. If you're trying to get the students to use a particular citation model, then of course you can give them guidance on how you might express that citation using another form, like MLA or Chicago style or something like that, instead of the style that's used by the institution here. So there's over 100 different manuscripts and some of his papers and some of Tony Hillerman's notes and correspondence that are online on the website. So this is one of the major exceptions to the idea that you have to go to the archive to view a manuscript item. You can view the manuscripts directly online here for Hillerman's. And I'm currently working on Rudolfo Anaya's manuscripts, and he's given us permission to put those up online, but it'll be another year before that happens. Alternately, let's finish up by looking at New Mexico digital collections. And here's where all of the content is directly available and downloadable. New Mexico's digital collections is very easy to navigate. You can do a search using the search box for a specific type of image. For example, if I wanted to find rodeos, and you can see here that we found something at least related to rodeos, Canadian cowgirls on wild horses. And you can see this photo here. We can download it using this link in the top right corner and save it to your desktop. Also, there's below the image itself is descriptive information about the photograph and what collection it comes from. And that's kind of important as in terms of whether a high resolution image will be available. So here you can see the publisher is the Palace of Governors Photo Archive up in Santa Fe. And this is one of their collection images. Also, if we go back to the home page, there we go. An easy way to navigate New Mexico digital collections is through this drop-down box. And the drop-down box shows the name of the institution, and then some institutions have more than one collection. So for example, the Palace of the Governors Photo Archives has got 5 different collections of photographs. Center for Southwest Research here, we have about 100. And then there are a variety of other library, UNM library, and special collections available as well. You can browse any of these collections by simply clicking on the name of the institution. And then, for example, here's the Harvey House Museum. Unfortunately, they have just started digitizing material, so there's not a whole lot of stuff in their collection. But if we go back here and find a, there we go. Here's a great CSWR collection, Buffalo Soldiers in Columbus, New Mexico. Historic photographs. And we can browse all of them. And there is a zoom feature that you can use here in the image viewer to get a little closer in on the photo. But frankly, downloading one of the copies of the image that's available is probably a faster way that you can get somebody looking at the details of an image. So it's important to note the descriptive information about each photograph. Again, in New Mexico digital collections, there's over 145,000 images from all over our state. And they are readily available for use in school and student projects. And I think I've gone 20 minutes over here, so I think that's probably a good place to leave off. Certainly, if you have any questions or need help with these sites, there is a help link on any of them. And usually for New Mexico digital collections and celebrating New Mexico statehood, Tony Hillerman and the Rocky Mountain Online Archive, those questions will get to me before they get to anybody else. So feel free to contact me either through those links or directly. My email address is kevco, K-E-V-C-O, @unm.edu. And I'd be happy to help you navigate and explore our wonderful state cultural heritage resources. thanks for everybody for coming to listen to me this evening. I appreciate it.
So much, Dr. Comerford, for your time, and we were planning to go to 5:30, so you're right on track.
Oh, good, good. I was thinking 5 o'clock. So.
Perfect. You're perfect. I did want to say, if you do use the papers collection, in America is an important sponsor for National History Day. There are many lesson plans available from the Chronicling America for using paper resources. Students use local newspapers in their projects are eligible for special awards at nationals if they bring their projects. I know 5 students from New Mexico who were recognized, and unfortunately none of them used the New Mexico archives. They were all the Library of Congress, which is a great resource to have, and it does make you stand out in the crowd when you get to nationals. I want to just clarify really quickly that some student is not in, let's say they're in Silver City. I know we have a lot of Silver City working on this. Is it better for them to find something at the Center for South? Is it better for them to go for a loan at Western New Mexico University to just contact the Center for Southwest Research directly?
Sure, that's a good question. The materials in the Center for Southwest Research, except for what we have put online, they cannot go through interlibrary loan because they have historic value. The best thing to do is, if you're really interested in, for example, the letters or papers of somebody famous, is to identify those using Rocky Mountain Online Archive, and then contact the Center for Southwest Research directly and see if you can work out an arrangement for them to scan at least part of the the collection that you're interested in. Usually we're talking about a small number of pages for a particular assignment, and that's the best way to get material that it hasn't already been digitized. Now, if you go to a number of our collections that are on Rocky Mountain Online Archive, many of them that are about, that include music, oral histories, or photographs, those have been digitized, and they'll say on the Rocky Mountain Online Archive inventory for that collection that they have been digitized, and it'll provide a link over to New Mexico Digital Collections where you can download them. So if you find a collection you're interested in Rocky Mountain Online Archive, correspondingly go and check New Mexico Digital Collections to see if it has already been scanned and made available online.
Great, that's great to know. I did want to say the link to the slide deck is up on the Humanities Council website at nmhum.org/history-day. I'll be adding in the individual links to all the archives. This video will be recorded and available on YouTube for reader viewing. And the next one is going to be to ask a website. So thanks for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time and Nancy Brown Martinez is the name you want at the Center for Southwest Research, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.